Now, corruption is the biggest hurdle to global efforts to improve healthcare, reduce poverty and spread education. That's according to the United Nations, which commemorated this Friday as Anti-Corruption Day. They say $1 trillion are paid in bribes each year and another $2.6 trillion are stolen through forms of corruption. That's 5% of global GDP. Now, while no country is completely immune, the United Nations says developing economies lose 10 times more money to corruption than they receive in the form of development assistance. Well, for more on this, let's speak to Transparency International's Programme Director, Maximillian Heywood, who's joining us now. Maximilian, good to speak to you. So this year we saw the major revelations of the Panama Papers and LuxLeaks. There he is. Do you think that this anti-corruption day is going to have any impact? Is whistleblowing the only way to try and reduce corruption in global economies?
Well, the Panama Papers have made a massive shift to this issue. People have a much greater understanding now of how shell companies and anonymous structures are being abused for reasons of corruption, the extent to which major banks, law firms, accounting firms are involved in enabling this type of corruption. And in general, we've seen governments having to react and forced to take action, for example, investigating and prosecuting a lot more than before. So yes, we're absolutely hopeful these developments this year have led to a change in the awareness and the action taken along this issue, right?
Maximilian, you mentioned there that's sort of reactive action being taken. What about being proactive? What about compulsory reporting of corruption? Some jurisdictions have that sort of thing. Do you think that's something that could work?
Absolutely. Prevention is an essential component to actually get rid of corruption finally. And what we're seeing is that we know what preventive measures need to be taken. So, for example, there has to be transparency around who owns these anonymous shell companies. There's no legitimate reason in this day and age to have these anonymous shell companies anymore. So there needs to be much more transparency about that. And there needs to be much greater enforcement of the existing rules. We have quite decent laws on the books in many countries, but they're just not being applied enough. So that's definitely the way forward in the coming years.
Now, the UN have said that corruption is one of the biggest hurdles to tackling these sustainability goals that were set by the UN. Just how much do you think has been lost in terms of revenue because of corruption?
Well, the estimates range from 1 trillion to up to 2.6 trillion, depending on the estimate. But the important thing is to remember what that money could have gone to. Those funds could have gone to hospitals, bridges, schools, all kinds of different infrastructure, sport. They could have gone to all of the things that governments are often struggling to find funds to support. And that is, in fact, the major cost. The human cost of corruption is what it really concerns us the most, in addition, of course, to the financial cost.
Maximilian, I mean, you do sterling work, and of course the UN have had this day today, but this comes down to greed, doesn't it? Human beings are greedy, they want more money. Surely there's no way you're ever going to be able to stamp out corruption entirely.
Probably not. We may not stamp it out entirely, but there's definitely measures that can be taken to make it much more difficult. At the moment, it's still far too easy for people who are greedy, and people are greedy to different extents. Some people are much more greedy than others. So I think we have to remember that the important goal here is to make the people who really want to take advantage of the system and make their life more difficult. Make it more difficult for them to find a bank that's willing to take their cash, make it more difficult for them to invest in, for example, high-end luxury real estate. There are many measures that can be taken to make corruption much more difficult.
Okay, Maximillian Heywood from Transparency International, thanks for joining us.